Okay, let's get started. Thank you for joining today's webcast titled More Databases, More Hackers. I'm Gina Chen, your host for today's program. Before we begin, let's go over a few housekeeping items. At the bottom of your audience console, you can see various application widgets. If you have a question, please submit it using the red Q&A widget. If this widget is already opened, you will see it to the right of your screen. We will try to answer all questions during the session, but if a more in-depth answer is required or if we are too short on time, your question will be answered later via email. Additional materials related to this program can be found in the resource list widget. It is a green widget with a file folder. Like the Q&A widget, if the widget is already opened, you will see it to the right of your screen. If you want to expand your slide view, simply click on the maximize icon at the top right of the slide box. If you have any technical issues during this webcast, please click on the help widget with the question mark icon. Finally, an on-demand version of the webcast will be available by tomorrow and can be accessed through the same audience link that was sent to you earlier this month. Imperva will also send out an email on Friday with a link to the recording. So without further delay, let me introduce Cheryl, who will be your speaker for today. Cheryl O'Neill is the Director of Product Marketing for Imperva, the leading provider of data security solutions. She is a 15-year information security and compliance technologist who works with the largest financial services, life science, and Fortune 500 companies to safely secure their most sensitive and regulated data. In her current role, Cheryl manages the Imperva SecureSphere data security solution. Cheryl?
Thank you, Gina, and welcome to today's webinar, More Databases, More Hackers. We all know that data is exploding, and we all have more and more data, both personally and professionally. We also know the frequency and sophistication of the data hacks is not going to stop anytime soon. We, as security professionals, need to keep pace or we will suffer both professionally and personally as our own data is traded on the black market like a commodity. One of the best ways to protect our data is by using a database audit and protection solution. Today we are going to look at the options available for protecting your database. My presentation today has three main sections: your reasons for investing, the options for an audit and protection solution, and the total cost of ownership. To illustrate the difference in the solutions, I will utilize an Imperva customer case study from a replacement of the IBM Guardian solution. This is just one example. You can find a case study from a global bank on the replacement of a native audit solution on the Imperva website. So we're going to look at our first drivers, and before I move into this, I want to look at database security and understand really what it is. I use the word database security as a summary term. Database security is really composed of multiple elements. It's a database audit, it's policy enforcement, it's user and activity visibility, and risk management. Each is going to play a role in establishing a protective data security and compliance program. For this, there are three main drivers. Regulation, which makes total sense. You're driven by the various regulations in your industry and geography. PCI, Sarbanes-Oxley, KSOX, JSOX, European privacy laws. The list never stops, and it's only going to get bigger. These are the must-dos for your organization. Next is security. We all should do security, but the reality is that this varies and is generally directed by the in-house chief security officer and your board. The third reason for the database security is company best practices. This is definitely driven by the peers in your industry, and this is where if you don't keep pace with what your competitors are doing, you will become the low-hanging fruit or the target for those database hackers. This is where boards are definitely stepping up their game, and we're seeing them take definite notice in this. So you may be hearing this from your own board when they're asking, what steps are we taking to not be hacked? What are the processes and technology that are we implementing? I do not want to be a victim. Make sure it doesn't happen. So, as Gina mentioned, there are some polls in the seminar today, and you can answer these. The polls can be moved to the side, and we will continue walking through the presentation, and you can submit them at any point in time. I'm going to move forward. Okay. So what are some of the regulations we want to look at? Let's briefly talk about these. These vary by industry, as I've already mentioned. But if you break these down, there will be a commonality with each of these. Your version of the left-hand side will consolidate down into 4 basic mandates: a need for audit and reporting, a need for user rights management, assessment and risk management, and an attack protection. SecureSphere is one of the technologies that addresses all of these requirements, but there are other ways to achieve these mandates. You can address all of these regulations manually and with the native audit. You can build a custom-built in-house solution or purchase an off-the-shelf product. It's all about the amount of time and effort to get the solution in place and provide cost-effective maintenance for that solution. A solution that is out of date is no solution. A solution with gaps is no solution. To that front, let's look at the type of data losses and breaches that are occurring so far this year. This source for this is the database DB.org, and it's as of September 11th. You can see that from the types of data breaches or data losses that have occurred, most are still driven by hacks. As we dig deeper into this, we can see that the types of data that are being stolen differs. When we go in and we talk to a company, typically they're going to start out with a requirement like PCI, and they want to know about protecting credit card and financial information and adhering to PCI requirements. This is totally appropriate, but as we dig into the data that's being stolen, we see that credit card data is not in the top category of data stolen in the United States. Addresses, emails, names, social security number, and passwords are the top data items stolen. You don't see credit card items, nor do you see other types of data, not even HIPAA data. What is important is helping the teams to define what is regulated, what is sensitive, and what ultimately needs protection. So let's take a look at the overlap between these. The conversation comes back to the must-dos versus the should-dos. It really is the difference between regulation and security. If we look at the regulations that drive people to investigate a data audit solution, we see PCI, HIPAA, SOX, and all the other requirements. These do overlap when you get down to those 4 basic mandates with the security requirements. Security can use these regulatory requirements to help define what needs protection. But from a pure security perspective, there are a lot of other things that need protection as well. We find one of the biggest challenges when helping companies is having them look beyond the regulatory requirements to take that next step to protect the sensitive data that is not regulated. The argument for protecting this data can be found in the headlines for high-profile breaches of the last year. The fallout from the sensitive data made public that was not regulated has had dramatic and very personal effects on many, many people. Perhaps a bit more mundane, but no less important, is the value of this data on the black market. Lists of names, account IDs, and passwords are worth far more than a list of credit card numbers that can be reset within hours. The reality is there will always be organizations that experience breaches, but if you can make yourself less vulnerable and reduce your risk exposure with a database audit and protection solution. One of the keys to this is having visibility into who's touching your data and what they're doing with it. We can see from this list that many organizations breached do not have this fundamental capability, and this is severely hampering their ability to respond and remediate. While it's bad that Uber had 50,000 records stolen and the office of Jeb Bush had 12,000 records stolen, at least they knew what was stolen. Unfortunately, for most everyone else on this list, they don't know what was stolen. For U.S. traded companies, the FTC is going to ask, can you prove what was stolen? If the answer is no, then they will ask how many records you have in that database. The breach notification will need to indicate all records were stolen. That drives up the cost and your risk exposure. The latest figures on the cost of a breach were at around $200 per record to rectify. If you had had the visibility into the data activity and could prove that the loss was limited to 10 records rather than 100,000, then the scope and the cost of the problem is significantly reduced. This makes database audit and protection a true cross-departmental need. Typically, we start out talking to a specific department driving a specific initiative. The DBAs and risk team are driving a compliance initiative. We're talking to security about their needs. We see these teams operating as silos, with each group having its own technology and processes fully independent of the other groups with the same need. Most organizations, however, the organizations that are the most successful are those that are looking for database audit and protection that have realized this technology solves the need of multiple groups. Multiple departments need to know who is accessing the data and what they are doing with it. So when we go into the organization, we try to bridge any departmental gaps and get them all to the table, because this table technology really is a cross-departmental problem solver. It's far easier for an organization to get support for a solution when multiple teams come together to validate the need. So let's take a look at the methods of deployment within an enterprise and what their options are. Another poll has come up on your screen, and you may look at it and answer it as needed. Great. Okay, let's take a look at what organizations are doing. There really are only a few options. By far, the most common solution for a database audit is no audit at all. Then there is the native audit we've been spoken about briefly. This is called the free solution, and we will look at just how free it is in a minute. Then there is the database audit and protection solutions, often called the off-database solutions. This includes SecureSphere. These provide the best protection and the most robust compliance capabilities. So why would somebody choose no audit over native audit if it's free? First and foremost, when you use a native audit tool, it is built into the system and it will have an impact on the database server. If you look at the vendor's tech documents, they will tell you that there will be a 20 to 40% impact on your database servers depending on what you audit. While the tools are often free, you need to look at that total cost of ownership to understand where your expenses are going to be incurred. In a minute, we're going to take a look at a video demo where you will see the enablement of a native audit has a 50% cost on the database server. Doing the math, if you cut your database server capacity by 50%, you will need to purchase twice as many database licenses, servers, supporting OS, and infrastructure. This is going to get expensive. Server performance is a primary concern for native audit. Equally important is the heterogeneous nature of most database environments. Large organizations will have data stored in multiple types of databases: Oracle, MS SQL, MySQL, and many others. To pull together an audit report means manually merging and correlating the data from multiple vendors' audit logs into a meaningful report that indicates who touched the data and what they did with it. Each vendor's logs will be different. Ultimately, you will not get what you are looking for, and it takes a tremendous amount of time. Another large issue is determining where the sensitive data is within the organization. Oftentimes, companies think they know where the data is, but the native audit tools do not provide this visibility. It's driven by a manual survey process. The bottom line is native audit is manually intensive, CPU intensive, and provides insufficient results to meet most compliance requirements. It provides absolutely zero security benefits on that front. Now we're going to take a look at a video demo, and I don't have the ability to pause, so I will try to speak in sync with the video, but I apologize if I do get off sync. On the right-hand side of the video, you are going to see the command window. I want you to watch the two right columns, milliseconds and transactions per second. On the left is the performance monitoring window. The Oracle server will be in the gray line, and I want you to watch the CPU usage and the disk I/O. When we start Oracle without native audit running and run a sample query script, the CPU usage will jump to 40%. You can also see the other KPIs. The hard disk I/O is 100, and the response time is about 1,000 milliseconds with 1,000 transactions per second. With no audit running, your database is using 40% of your CPU, responding in 1,000 milliseconds and handling 1,000 transactions per second. This is our baseline for comparison. Now we will turn on native audit. We are running the exact same query. The CPU usage stays the same, but look at the other KPIs for the performance monitoring. It is ranging between 400 and 600. The response time has doubled to 2,000 milliseconds, and the transactions per second have dropped by 50% to 500 transactions per second. The database performance has been cut in half. This illustrates the problem with a free native audit tool. They are not actually free at all. You will need to double the size and number of your database servers. Now we want to move on and look at what SecureSphere looks like. First, we will turn off native audit and let the performance return to normal levels. The SecureSphere remote agents will be the red lines, and Oracle will remain gray. I'm going to wait here for it to catch up to me. All right. Now you're going to see that the agent CPU usage is very low, and the Oracle CPU is not impacted. Equally low is the disk I/O. Looking at the response times, transactions per second, we can see that they are almost equal to the baseline Oracle server of 1,000 milliseconds and with 1,000 transactions per second. The takeaway is that with SecureSphere, the impact on the database is very minimal, unlike native audit, which requires a significantly more amount of your server to perform and maintain performance. This is a key requirement for any form of solution. It must add protection and audit without negatively impacting your database performance. Okay. Now that we've seen that a data audit and protection solution can reside on the database with minimal server impact, let's look at the monetary and human costs of the solution. Unfortunately, there is not a Gartner MQ for this space due to the limited number of enterprise-level solutions, so I'll outline the market for you. There are two main solutions, Imperva SecureSphere and IBM Guardium. While McAfee and Oracle do have our offerings, if you look at them closely, you will quickly find that they don't address the breadth or depth of Guardium and SecureSphere. Do your due diligence, but I will be focusing on Guardium and SecureSphere. At present, Imperva is replacing Guardium with SecureSphere at a rate of about 4 to 5 organizations per quarter. IBM has had a number of challenges in these organizations when they attempt to deploy in complex or large environments. The remainder of the presentation will look at the experience of one Imperva customer that replaced IBM Guardium with SecureSphere. I will not be mentioning the company by name, but I will provide a very explicit set of facts about the IBM install and the replacement deployment. So we're going to compare and look at the differences in the deployments. The client is a major computer manufacturing company. For 3 years, they utilized IBM Guardium. They used 135 virtual appliances, and they were able to monitor about 500 databases. We're talking physical databases here, not database instances. The ratio is about 3.7 database servers per IBM appliance. It took about 3 years to deploy 135 appliances, and they never actually finished the deployment as they bottlenecked at 500 and could not go further. They hired staff to do the deployment and maintain the solution and ended up with 10 full-time equivalents using 100% of each role to operate and maintain the Guardium solution. Once the client decided IBM could not complete the deployment to 1,000+ servers, they made the decision to move to Imperva. To be fair, they had not evaluated Imperva before they opted for IBM Guardium. Imperva came in and deployed 65 appliances to monitor the 500 databases within 60 days. It was done. Well, I'm not sure how many they are currently monitoring. We did deploy to 1,050 databases in less than 1 year on those 65 appliances. The client team chose not to lay off anyone, but they are now only using approximately 50% of each role, and so they have recovered 5 full-time equivalents that can be utilized on other projects. More importantly, they were also able to expand the functionality. In addition to audit monitoring, they are now utilizing a proactive blocking functionality that stops suspicious activity before it has a chance to cause problems or steal data. So let's take a look at these two solutions architectures to understand what makes them so different under the hood when they look so similar from the outside and on paper. We have to start with the capacity design of the core collection process. Sorry, a poll just popped up that you can answer at that point. Guardium, as well as many other enterprise technologies, are using a traditional relational database to store data. Imperva also utilized this model until about 8 years ago when we recognized the limitations of trying to audit multiple relational databases with a single relational database. How could we perform a magnitude of order faster than any database we monitored, or every database we monitored, I should say, and how could we effectively scale or add functionality like blocking without impacting the production databases? So the architecture needed to change. Imperva quickly adopted a new model for storing data. We looked for a model that would let us write large amounts of audit data without the overhead of a relational database. We found that a flat file model, similar to many modern big data offerings, was the optimal solution. The Imperva proprietary flat file architecture provides a high efficiency model that allows the collection of audit data from many databases into a single flat file model. Imperva still utilizes a relational database on the management server for reporting. This gives us both the speed of a flat file system with the familiarity of a structured reporting tool for your internal teams. The flat file model has other advantages. The flat file compresses much more efficiently than database files that have all the overhead. We can compress the data at 20x, which reduces the store requirements and the need for archiving of audit data to offline storage. As mentioned at the beginning, one of the key requirements for a data audit protection system is the need for visibility. The flat file system provides real-time visibility because the flat file data can be transferred in real time, providing support for real-time analytics and investigations that need 100% context and fidelity. For security, anything other than real time is not protection. Alerts need to happen in real time, and blocking only works if you can stop the transaction from completing. Knowing about a breach after it has happened is not protection, it is audit. We see this with many of our IBM Guardium replacements. The IBM Guardium system rolls up the structured data from the distributed appliances to their management server. This can take time, hours. That's hours before reporting or investigation can begin, and it's no longer high-fidelity contextual information. So what's under the hood? If you're going to read from multiple relational databases and write to a single relational database, at some point in time you will bottleneck. This slide depicts a scenario where we would read from 5 databases and try to write all of that information into one relational database. If you look up databases, relational databases on Google, you will find that most are optimized for reads. Yet here we are trying to read from 5 and write to 1. In the case of our global computer manufacturer, they found they hit the bottleneck at approximately 3.7 databases, meaning for every 3 to 4 databases, they needed to deploy another Guardium appliance. The Imperva average is around 20 databases per appliance writing to a flat file structure. I don't want to pick on IBM exclusively here. There are many enterprise technologies that rely on the same model. We tend to see a lot of these technologies taking 3 to 5 times as much hardware as Imperva. Let me give you a big picture look at what that translates to for our global manufacturing company. On the right, you can see the IBM Guardium deployment. They deployed 135 appliances over a 3-year period and were able to monitor 500 databases. On the left, you can see the Imperva deployment. We deployed 500 databases by the 60-day mark, and that included removing the IBM systems that were installed there. By the end of year 1, we were monitoring over 1,000 databases on just 65 appliances. We also trained the in-house team so they were able to take over management, and our professional services team was not required to be there to maintain or do further deployments. The existing team is spending less time on the solution and getting more from it as they were able to deploy blocking and other functionality that they could not with IBM Guardium. Consider the implications of this big picture. Think about the rack space, the power and cooling requirements. Well, not all organizations will have 1,000 databases that can benefit from they all can benefit from a more efficient architecture, and all will have teams that are at or near capacity. Recovering 10, 20, 50% of their time for other projects is going to be a benefit to a company of any size. This translates into some powerful results. Your lower total cost of ownership. Labor dropped by 50%. It took 60 days to deploy rather than 3 years. Sorry about that. They expanded the rollout to over 1,000 databases, and the actual annual costs were cut by 72%. They dropped the cost to $744 per database. This is far more affordable than the cost of $200 per record in the event of a data loss and need to remediate. So when you look at these technologies, I want you to look for some things and be aware of certain things. A data audit and protection solution is likely going to offer multiple deployment options. One of those options is going to place an agent on your database server. This is what we looked at earlier. You will need to be aware that there is an impact, and that impact will vary by vendor. There will be a management server and at least one appliance. Look at the architecture. What modes of deployment are supported? What is the ratio of databases to appliances? How do they write and store data? How is that data centralized? I've given you one example of a replacement we have done, but there are many other clients that have replaced their native Audit or IBM solutions due to the architectural and performance issues. The bigger the organization, the bigger the need for efficiency and scalability. Then consider the maintainability of the solution. A year from now, it's going to be time to upgrade. You have to have full backward and forward compatibility from the management server right down to the agent. There will be no time window big enough to upgrade everything in one shot. The components need to work together throughout the upgrade process without audit gaps or loss of fidelity or functionality. Verify your vendor provides this level of functionality and capability. Can you imagine what it might take to update 165 appliances and 500 databases if you have to do it all in one shot? Look for the delays in reporting. Will IBM's new reporting capabilities work if all the local database agents or appliances have not been upgraded? These are the questions to ask and verify in the test lab. Don't wait until you're in production to realize the lack of compatibility will cost you. This concludes my presentation for the day, and we will move into Q&A in a moment. For those of you looking to create your own checklist of consideration, here is a starting point for the types of requirements you should look for in a data audit and protection solution. With that, I'd like to return to Gina and see if we have any Q&A for today's session.
Thanks, Cheryl. Along with Cheryl, Matan Gall has joined us for this portion of the program. We'll be reviewing questions. Matan is the Senior Product Manager for Database Security at Imperva. As a reminder, if you have a question, please submit it using the Q&A widget. This widget is located at the bottom of your console and to the right of your screen. We'll try to answer all questions during the session. Again, if a more in-depth answer is needed or we are short on time, your question will be answered later via email. So let's get started. As we scan through the list, Cheryl, why don't we start with, if someone's asking if we don't have an agent or don't want an agent on our database, what are our options?
Great question. So we did see that we have an agent deployment option, but we also have a network-based option. And there are two modes that are supported. And Matan, are you with us? Would you like to drive into some detail on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Essentially, we have the ability to do complete network monitoring. So essentially, you can choose one of two deployment modes other than agent-based. You can use an inline mode, which is essentially a bridge, a transparent bridge. Traffic goes in one side of the appliance and out the other. This, of course, means that we can see all the traffic as it goes through. The other option is to use a stand port or a tap, network tap, to send the traffic to the appliance in sniffing mode, essentially replicating the traffic so you can get, so the Imperva appliance can get the information. In both situations, we also support blocking. Obviously, the inline mode will be more reliable in that respect. And in both modes, you can also combine this with agents, saying the agent is going to monitor part of the traffic, or let's say local traffic, and the network the network deployment will be monitoring the rest of the traffic or any other combination.
Great, thank you, Matan. We just got another question come through the widget. Is SecureSphere integrated with any SIM tool such as HP ArcSight or RSA Envision? Cheryl, do you want to take that one?
Great, thank you. I'd love to take that question. SecureSphere can work with any SIM tool. We have many options and dedicated APIs and export options to push information to that. We also have a dedicated Splunk integration with a dedicated Splunk panel that has predefined data placeholders so that the integration is a seamless two-way model.
Great, thank you. Matan, we have a question out here for you. I think this is more for you. What is the difference between security scanning and audit scanning?
All right, I'm not sure I fully understood the question. Let me try to elaborate a little bit, and hopefully it will be to the point. basically, when we talk about security and audit, it's usually not scanning per se. So for the purpose, if we are talking about scanning, for the purpose of scanning a database to see if it's secure, and scanning the database to see whether it is compliant with audit or requirements, these would be very similar, but to some extent different requirements. If I have a regulation that I need to comply with because I have an audit requirement, such as DSA, STIG, PCI, DSS, those kinds of things, I will be scanning for a specific checklist. And if I have a security requirement, I may use similar checklists, but they would be based on my internal requirements and my security expert advice, and I'll define the checklist based on this. The known regulations that I mentioned have predefined checklists for individual databases, MS SQL, Oracle, and others, as well as this more generic list that would be required for technically any database, to some extent flat files and stuff like that.
Okay, thank you, Matan. We seem to be getting a couple of questions around cloud. So here's one. Is SecureSphere available in the AWS cloud? Cheryl?
Yeah, great question. SecureSphere just launched into the AWS cloud, and we are available in the cloud. We are the only enterprise-level solution available there at this time. So we'd love to talk to you about it, so give us a call.
Okay. Matan, here's one question I think that you might be able to answer. Do you provide user right management?
Yes, we do. Basically, as part of the solution, SecureSphere provides user rights management, which means we look at the database, and we answer the question. We can be tough to answer using native tools. Who has access to what? Essentially, who in your organization has access to what type of information, and specifically, since we also provide data classification, we can tell you who has access to sensitive information anywhere in your organization, wherever we see it. And we also enable the user to review the existing rights, send them to data owners, and actually go through an approval process. All of these things essentially enable you not just to know who has access to what type of information, but also make sure that you're only providing access based on the need to know and the business needs.
Okay. One more question here. Do you have the ability to work with the multitude of databases we currently have? And they give examples of Oracle, SQL Server, Sybase. Cheryl or Matan, which one of you wants to answer that?
Matan can probably give you a closer count, but we definitely work with all of the major database manufacturers, most of their versions, and have support for a very broad portfolio of databases and big data instances. Anything you want to add there, Matan?
No, I think you covered this pretty well. Our release notes, as well as some documents, the website cover specifically which databases are supported. And if you have a question, you can give us a call or an email, and we'll be happy to tell you in more detail all about it.
So Great. I think we are at our time limit for today, so I wanted to close off the session. And thank you, Matan and Cheryl, for taking time from your day to go through the webinar with us.
Gina, I just do want to point out that if you've submitted a question that we didn't get to, we'd be happy to talk to you offline, and we can follow up with you individually with those questions.
Yes, that was how I was going to close.
Oh, sorry, thank you.
Yeah, in addition to that, I also wanted to mention thank you to everyone for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on this webinar. And also, please look for an email from Imperva, and we'll provide you with an archive of the webcast as well as a presentation of the deck. I think there are a couple of questions in there around that. For those of you whose questions we missed, as Cheryl mentioned, we'll definitely get back to you via email. Thanks again for joining us, and have a great day.